Today we are going to be discussing diversity, equality and inclusion and the role that reward and employee benefits plays in that, either to help improve your DEI or how it can trip up your DEI strategies. Now, there are clearly many diversities in any organization and they are all important and they're all sometimes uncomfortable to talk about. But they are also different. So today, most of our conversation will focus more on ethnic diversities. And I am delighted today to be chatting to Andrea Pattico, Chief People Officer at MVF, the customer generation platform, which was voted Best Company to Work For in the Sunday Times Best Company 2020. So welcome, Ange. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start off with like the big hairy question, the difficult one. Yeah. So if you're an HR person, reward, benefits, and you're thinking, I need to have a look at my reward plan, I need to look at my benefits to see if there is an ethnic bias or outright discrimination. Yeah. How do you even go about reviewing benefit policies and practices to address historic racism?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think it's one that every company and every practitioner has grappled with. But there's a really great PwC study, and it's not so much targeted at ethnic diversity as all forms of diversity, but they have a four-step process. And the very first step in the process is understanding the facts of today. And I really love the fact that they keep it so simple, because data has to underpin everything that we do. So I would always say, if you have I'll come back to policies, but if you have a people system or an HR system, and you've had that system for probably, I would say, anything from 3 years upwards, you're probably going to have a good amount of data that you can start to analyze and take a look at, from everything to kind of seeing the numbers of people that you have in your business from a diverse perspective, to looking at different aspects of your processes, your funnels, whether that be recruitment or reward. Benefits is a little bit trickier, I think, because there are some things which are that you can see, and there are some things which are more intangible, and it's the intangible stuff that is harder to measure, I think. And the intangible things, I think, you really need to talk to people in order to understand whether they're working or not. So if it's tangible, measure it. And if it's intangible, talk about it. That's probably the simplest way that I could kick it off.
So, you know, one of the areas in reward when you talk about data and ethnicity and other diversities is ethnicity pay gaps. Can you just talk a bit about what you've been doing at MVF and what you've learned from that?
Sure. So we made a conscious decision, because the government had decided that obviously there's the gender pay gap, and there was lots of kind of talk and noise in the news about the government bringing in ethnicity pay gaps, and they've delayed it. I think we're on the third time that of them delaying it now. I'm not quite sure of the reasons. So from an MVF perspective, we thought, we're not going to wait until we are forced or told to measure our ethnicity pay gap. We're going to do it because we think it's really important. So we have been measuring our pay gap. We are actually making our ethnicity pay gap public in the same way that we do our gender pay gap, because we want to be held accountable for improvement. And for us, we have found that, and I don't want to give it away because it's actually going out soon, so I've got to be careful. But there are things that we have learned. So we have a third of our business are leapers, and so leapers for us is the terminology we use instead of BAME. So just to make sure everybody knows, when I say LEAP, that's what I mean. And
Could you say and tell everybody what LEAPA stands for?
Sure.
That's very interesting as well.
Sure. It stands for Lived Experience of Ethnic People. We coined that as a phrase, and we did that because we don't like the term minority, because we aren't a minority. I say we because I obviously am a Black woman, and also we think that BAME leads to lazy reporting, and we wanted to recognise that even within you might say a Black person, but even within Black people there are many different ethnic groups. So we want to be cognizant of that. So we have done that within our pay gap. We've looked at the different pay gaps within broader groups, but also tried to break it down. We've done that across not just our business as a whole, but every single department. We've taken the data, not just from the pay gap, but we've also looked at rates of promotion. We've also looked at probation. We've looked at our recruitment funnel. I mean, we haven't just gone to the pay gap, because if you just do the pay gap, it doesn't tell you enough. So causality is really important. So yeah, I'll stop talking.
Sorry, there's so much to say on this particular topic. I wish I had a whole day to talk to you about this, but I wanted to build on that, because you've touched on a number of things there about progression and recruitment and so on. But coming back with that reward and benefits filter.
Yeah,
we know in reward and benefits that the people who get the best benefits and the access to LTIPs and bonuses and the best pay are the senior employees. So that is I'm sure when you look across your business, you're going to see that skew across, and lots of diversities not falling into those buckets.
Yeah.
So what can a reward benefits team, HR team, do to ensure that people from different diversity groups have more of a level playing field, so their efforts to achieve progression come about, and therefore they are able to access those better rewards and benefits?
Yeah, I love this question, because I still find, even in 2021, a lot of our reward and benefit structures are what I would say designed around a them and us. And by that, I mean whether you are senior or not. And so if you're senior, you get the best. And if you're not, you kind of get a good package, but it's not as great. So to your point, LTIPs, equity, etc. We at MVF, we've taken away the them and us. Everyone is a human being, and everyone gets the same and the same access to the same benefits. So as a private equity backed business, most private equity companies would keep their equity for your exec board. But we actually go deeper than that, and we base our equity on meritocracy. So who is doing what job in the business and adding value to our business. So that means that you don't have to be senior to have equity in our business. It's based on what you bring.
Which is great. But you also look very much at your talent, and you review your talent progression process, and you look at the data, and it shows some very interesting things about who was getting promoted and who wasn't. You got in there and tackled it.
We did. So we actually introduced the talent review process in response to looking at how can we get a better handle on understanding everybody in our business. So we did this. We actually introduced it for the first time last year, and it happens once a year, where all of the leadership teams, together with the exec board, we talk about all 530 people in our business, name by name. And what that does is it means that it gets rid of the seniority kind of nonsense. It gets rid of he who shouts loudest, and which is, sometimes we claim to be meritocratic, but there are people that have got loud voices, and that can get in the way. And it means we have to really understand who we've got. One of the things that we learned from last year is that we have stars, basically, and our superstars, there was not one ethnic individual in our superstars kind of rating, and that spoke volumes to me, because then the question is, why not? Were all of those individuals at a certain level, certain seniority level, or not? No, they were all different types of levels. Is it because we didn't have enough people from different ethnic groups coming through the progression pipeline? That was probably more it. And so what we did in response to that is we took department data. We looked at each of our departments. We looked where there was, we also know that our contact center, which is where the largest concentration of leapers are, but they're also, in terms of the pay for roles, it's going to be one of the more junior roles within the organization. So by definition, if you've got a large concentration of leapers and it's one of the more junior roles, you're probably not going to have them being in that kind of top category. So we're looking now at how can we sponsor, how can we mentor, how can we elevate, how can we support and build confidence in our leapers. We also looked at our internal mobility and our movement within the business. And we found that only one leap female applied for any of our open roles internally. So we've been taking a look at how we can do better in terms of making sure that leapers are aware when there are open roles and making sure that they feel confident enough to apply for it. I mean, that didn't just apply to leapers, it applied to women in general. So we've been taking a look at that. And these things are really, really important. So we've set actions around that for this coming year, actually, so that we're working on those now. Hopefully we'll make a difference.
And you and I were chatting the other day about just some of the things you've got. I think you said you had 3 training courses that you were doing for your bleepers, I think they were, yes, in terms of dress in the workplace and how people talk to each other to give them that confidence, but also the fact you've got a business conduct committee. And I was quite horrified to hear of some of the adaptations that Black employees might make to make themselves acceptable in a workplace that actually shouldn't be happening. Could you share that? Because I think a lot of other people like myself won't have even thought of those behaviours and actions.
And it's so interesting that you say that other people won't have heard of it, because I guess, you know, sometimes we don't talk about it. I say we, as a Black person, I don't talk about it because I've lived it all my life. So I kind of just am used to it, which I know I shouldn't be, but it is that way. So what we've done in order to help with confidence, we want the LEAP vision is to make sure that everybody can come to work being their authentic self. And in order for that to happen, we've put this October, we're introducing as a benefit the Dress to Impress series of workshops. And that is going to cover things like, you know, how do you take care of your hair if you are a Black leaper? Because our hair is very different. You can't see mine because it's covered by my scarf. But also, who's going to rock up at work with, you know, an African head wrap? I do, and I feel comfortable doing so, but not everybody does. And so we want people to feel that they can be their authentic self, that it's not a hindrance to their progression. And one of the things that kickstarted this for me was actually a story that was about an MVFer who no longer works with us, but she used to straighten her hair every single day. She's got naturally curly hair. She would straighten her hair every single day because she thought that if she didn't, she wouldn't be taken seriously. And that, I mean, it really hurts my heart, if I'm going to be really honest, because nobody should have to censor themselves in the workplace in order to feel that they have to be acceptable. And that's what it boils down to for me. So I would say if employers are out there, contact me, because I can give you access to, you know, some of the professionals that we're using for hair care and for fashion styling, but just helping people feel confident, because confidence starts from inside and then comes out. And also the reason why we want to do it as well is because MVF, we are very visual as a company from a PR and a communications perspective. And a lot of our leapers want to be able to represent MVF, but they also want to feel confident doing so. Yeah. And the more confident that they feel, the more that they can represent themselves and their brand, because you only get one chance to make a first impression. Then they'll get chosen for the videos and they'll be appearing, and representation does matter. So if people see them on the videos as leapers, that means that we can increase our recruitment pipeline of candidates that are coming through, because leapers attract leapers. I know people don't necessarily like to hear that. Some people don't anyway. But it's true. Like attracts like. So yeah.
And on that, and you talked about, you know, how you feel in yourself and being your authentic self. And one of the other things that we talked about the other day was people sometimes even changing their names on the email in order to fit in, but that your name is actually core to who you are. Yeah. So do you want to just talk about, I think that came a bit more under your business contact committee, but just again, for people, white people like myself, who aren't aware of these kind of things, be helpful to say it out loud and what happens.
Thank you for that prompt, because actually our business conduct committee was put in place for very different reasons. But we had one of our leapers from our sales team. He came to me and he said, Ange, you need to know that, I want you to know that this stuff is going on. People talk to clients and they change their name because they think clients won't liaise with them. So they'll change their name when they're talking to clients, they'll change their name or try and change it on the email. We even have had, because I've got somebody in my team whose name is not their name, but they've been at MVF longer than me. None of their family call them by the name that people know them at MVF. But they decided it was just easier because to be called by a different name. These are the things that people ought not have to go into the workplace to face. You should be able to be who you are. So we've done two things. Firstly, the Business Conduct Committee, we've got a way now for those issues to be raised, because I'll be very straightforward about it. Our CEO, who is the best CEO in the world, I say this all the time, he is amazing, Michael Teixeira. He is not going to work with people at the expense of our MVF's sanity. He's just not going to do it. And fairness and justice are two pillars that he lives his life by. And I think in all of this, we have to be really human. Values must count for something. So we make sure that the BCC, those issues get raised. But also we've got a program which is called, and it's going to escape me now when I want it, conscious inclusion. That's it. So rather than talking about unconscious bias, which I actually don't think is I personally don't believe in unconscious bias, because I think as human beings, we are accountable for our actions. And more often than not, we know when we are doing things that we ought not to be doing. So that's my view. It's a personal view. Nobody has to agree with me, by the way. But in our conscious inclusion workshops, we have a section called Say My Name, and your name is your identity. And so now when MVFs are joining us, we, in those workshops, teach them, we want you to be authentic here. And if you feel that your name is hard to pronounce, we don't mind, we're going to learn. Because your name is who you are. Yeah. It is what makes you you. Yeah.
I want to delve a bit more into that. We talk about being your authentic self at work and really link that to well-being. I don't think you can say you have good employee well-being if people can't be their authentic selves.
Agreed.
And we're doing this video linked to the Employee Wellbeing Congress. I just want to touch on probably two areas that we had a chat about the other day, which was interesting and perhaps more practical for some of the people watching this video, where they might think, but we want more representation, for example, among our mental health first aiders.
Yeah.
I'm just not getting different diversity stepping forward. I'm not getting, it might be women, it might be Black people, it might be LGBTQ. What would you advise if they wanted to get people more to step up so others know where they can go to for help and who they can talk to?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And often whenever I see some wellbeing initiatives, they are being communicated in a way that doesn't actually speak to the heart of the community they want to target. And so there's a learning for us as practitioners, really, which is you've got to understand how different communities speak to each other, rather than assuming that your communication is reaching them just because that's how we typically speak to everybody. And in those kind of cases, if you talk to people, people will talk to you. So I always go and ask, we are thinking about introducing this. What is the best way, do you think, to introduce this particular benefit or this aspect of wellbeing into our workplace? And I know it sounds really simple, but the art of talking is really lost these days, because everything's being done by computers and emails and Slack messages and things. But people don't get offended at being asked, how can we serve you in the best way? Yeah, and yeah. That's really the question. So I would start there, asking for advice and input. And And then typically out of that, which is what we've seen at MVF, there's always somebody who comes up that is really passionate about what you're trying to do, and will either ask to work with you, or you can ask, could you help us with this? And they will always say yes, always. The one caution that I would say is try not to use it as an education aspect, because for a lot of individuals, like from a LEAP background in particular, if they feel that they have to educate on the community, that's quite tiring for people, especially if it's education on trauma. It's really quite difficult for people from a wellbeing perspective. So it's more about advice about how they can be served, rather than educating about something that might be quite difficult or triggering, I would say. The other part of that is, as well as the cultural sensitivity, I think with our EAPs as well, we've got to challenge our EAPs more, because our EAPs are a wonderful service and I've got a lot of time for them. But again, they don't necessarily take cultural sensitivity and how different communities operate into consideration. And I'll give you an example, actually, and it's a personal one for me. I've been working now for this is my 25th or 26th year. I have to go back. I'm getting this, and I love it. But I've never been, growing up in the community that I did, it just wasn't the done thing to be going to the pub every Friday. So when I started work, and I'd always get invited to come to the pub, and I'd be thinking, why is everyone going to the pub? Just because it's not what our community, I didn't grow up with that. And interestingly, some conversations that aid progression can often happen at the pub. So something really simple like that, as a practitioner, I think it's good to think about from a wellbeing perspective, if communities don't operate in these typical ways that are manifested in our everyday kind of workplace and the way we do things around here, what are we hindering people with? And I often used to feel like I was always going to be on the outside of progression just because I didn't go to the pub, and I couldn't have conversations in the same way that other people might do. For me, I was lucky because I'm probably a little bit, I'm very tenacious, so I got to where I wanted to get to. But I think it's useful for us to remember that not everybody has grown up with the same practices, and not everybody sees the world in the same way. So we've got to make sure that it's an equal playing field for everybody.
And that is a good point. And it comes back to something you emphasized with me beforehand as well, is that there are lots of diversities. So it won't just be an ethnic group that doesn't feel comfortable with something. You'll probably find there's lots of other diversities that are also not comfortable with the so-called default norm. So it's good just to review those, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
So, and I think we've run the clock down here. There was so much more to talk to you about. Huge amount to learn on in this, and I was learning as you were talking as well. And I just found that it's so important that all of us become aware and educate ourselves. And you're really what you said about asking people. We all know that in the HR profession. Just go and ask, and it's such a valuable thing that you shared with us. So thank you for giving us your time, for being someone who's prepared to be a leader in HR, to be a pioneer, to be a trailblazer. Not everybody's able to do that, but you're doing that so well. So thank you. And you're not just doing on the ethnic diversity, I might add. You're also a woman. Yeah, there's a number of areas you're working in. So well done. Keep going. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the chat.
Thank you.